welcome to the Conquering Hill podcast with your host, Nicholas Gagnier. And I have a very special guest today, Edie Weinstein. Edie Weinstein has her master's degree in social work, and she's also a licensed social worker, a psychotherapist, journalist, interfaith minister, speaker, editor, author of The Bliss Mistress Guide to Transforming the Ordinary into the Extraordinary, and the founder of Hug Mobsters, armed with love that offers free hugs worldwide. Edie also offered her first TEDx talk on October 1st called Overcoming the Taboo on Touch. You can find that on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me today in the podcast. How are you, Edie?
Wonderful. And I think our mutual friend Tom Zeman connected us. I think that's
Yes, he did.
I found you. So, hi, Tom.
Mhm. Hey, how's it going, Tom? Yes, he's a great guy, very, very
Mhm.
nice man. I appreciate him having us get connected here.
Mhm.
He's got great energy. So let's see. I wanted to have you on today because you're an expert in becoming a resilient thriver. So when I say, when I ask you, how do I become a resilient thriver? What would be the first step I should take?
Remind yourself that you have survived everything that has ever happened in your life because you're here. And the things that happened to you, think about what can I glean from them. And this is not about blaming the victim. It isn't about I attracted this abuse or challenge in my life. It happened. However it happened. Now what? What am I going to do with what happened in my life? So that those are some of the first steps that are necessary to be able to deal with whatever life throws at you. And when I think about resilience, we were talking about this briefly before the show, is that resilience to me is about the ability to bounce back from whatever happens in your life. And I use the example of a Super Bowl that you drop it and it bounces up really high, but you got to drop it first. Okay, you can't like go like that and expect it to bounce high. And then the word thriver comes to mind when I think about the trio of victim, survivor, thriver. When someone's a victim of something, they are at the mercy of or the whim of someone else's choices or behaviors, and they feel victimized. Now, there are people who were victims of abuse and trauma, and they had no control over what happened to them. But the next step is to be a survivor, is to say, yeah, that happened, and I am not going to let that keep me down. I'm going to take a look at what happened. I'm going to look for whatever supports I can find, whatever strengths I have within me. But I'm still identifying as a survivor of that, whatever it is. A thriver takes it the next level up and says, yes, this happened. Yes, I survived it. And I'm going to thrive in my life. I am not only not going to let this get to me, I am going to keep on going. And I'm going to take other people with me. A thriver reaches back and helps other people who've been through what they've been through.
Yeah,
So
it's
you look,
definitely a special individual that can do
yeah,
that.
yeah. So you look at people like, um, oh, do you know who Gilda Radner was? She was
No.
on, you're probably too young to remember her, on Saturday Night Live, but people my generation will remember her as a comedian. She died of ovarian cancer. And after she died, her brother and her counselor created Gilda's Clubs, which are non residential cancer support communities. And that's for people living with cancer and for their families and friends. So even though her brother missed her terribly, and Gene Wilder was her husband at the time, comedian Gene Wilder, they created this as a way of honoring what she went through. The people that founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving, same thing,
Right.
right? They took a tragedy and turned it into something healing for other people.
Mm. Yeah, well, from a personal experience, I kind of fall underneath that umbrella a little bit when, the in the darkest place in my life was when I lost everything. I was married here in Panama. I had built a house. I had my daughter and stepson, and one day I came back and I realized it was over. Right. And
Mhm.
I had nowhere to go. I had lost my house and I lost my ability to raise my daughter at the time. So I had to go back to the United States without her alone. And I felt defeated. And in the midst of being there, I always wanted to come back here to spend my life with my daughter. And I just wasn't sure what I was going to be able to do because I couldn't work here legally in Panama. So, in the midst of
Mhm.
6 months to a year working really hard in the United States, saving money, I realized that I just got to build a house. I already had some land that I acquired previously from her grandparents. I just wanted to build a house here so I could at least raise her and be with her. And as time went on and I was clearing some brush, clearing some jungle, and it was this beautiful tree called the soursop guanabana tree, which I didn't chop down at the time. And I thought, all right, I know there's some health benefits to this fruit. It tastes delicious. I'm not gonna. It's the biggest tree in the lot, so I'm not gonna cut it down. I'll figure out how I'm gonna build around it. So I never did. Went back to the States alone again after visiting here, and then I did some research on soursop. And if anyone ever has any time to do some research or Google soursop guanabana, which is a Spanish term, you'll find some studies and that supposedly, support the case that it's very beneficial in fighting cancer. People have labeled it 10,000 times stronger than chemotherapy. So when I read this, I kind of fell to the ground laughing, thinking to myself, "There's no way in hell I have the cure for cancer on my property." But that sparked the idea of building the hostel here in Panama with my desire to be here to raise my daughter, and I could have a business that offered free fruit, vegetables, medicinal teas to all the guests that came here to the hostel. So when you say bring people along with you, that turned into my goal. And then I actually had a goal wall behind me I took the idea from Jack Canfield's book Success Principles, and he said write down 101 goals. And I didn't get to 101, but I got to like 20 something, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to paint on the wall what is your goal? And I'll have guests come here and volunteers, and they'll all paint their goals on the wall, and collectively we'll get there. My goal was to open the Soursop Hostel for the universe to visit, and for every visitor to leave destined to pursue their dreams. So, in essence, I feel like I did bring some people along with me because I want people to live their dreams because I am currently doing that, and it did come from a very very dark place. That was the seed that really sprouted into my life. I was only 33 years old at the time, and generally, we're taught at a young age to, you got to go to school. You got to what do you want to be? What's your career going to be? You got to go to school. You got to go to college. You got to find someone. Have a family, have a house, and that's all well and good, but it's not for everyone. You can't fit everyone into that box, and it's okay if you don't know what you want to be. And sometimes a tragic event or something that you feel like isn't going your way in life, you can use that. And at that time, when I was 33 and I had that dream and all I wanted to do was be here with my daughter, like nothing, absolutely nothing in my life mattered except for building the hostel. I stopped, bad habits. I started saving more money where I could, and it just consumed me. So if you're out there listening, just because you might feel like life just knocked your butt down to the ground, and it's hard to get back up, and the whole you see where you want to be, but you're not there yet, and it's going to take a lot of work and energy to get there. It's okay. The
Mhm.
journey is actually the best part about it. Like that, the time when I built this place, the magic in it, like the energy I had, I've never had it in my life, and I was able to use, the darkest moment of my life to propel me to where I want to go.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's true for most people that I know that have experienced the dark nights of the soul. When I think back on what led to everything that I'm doing now, I call it the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb trail. this event happened that introduced me to this person and this experience and so on. I call 1992 lovingly our year from hell. My husband and I had moved down to Florida. We were the publishers of a magazine called Visions, had to do with holistic health and wellness. And we started publishing it in 1988. And we moved to Florida because we thought, how wonderful would it be to be able to go swimming every day, to live in paradise. My parents had just retired and moved down there. So in February of 92, the best thing that happened that year is we adopted our son. And in March of 92, I had an ectopic pregnancy. And I didn't even know I was pregnant. For those who don't know what it is, um, the fetus develops in the fallopian tube, which is not meant to stretch to accommodate a baby. So it burst, it ruptured, and I almost hemorrhaged to death. That was in March. In May of 92, my husband was diagnosed with hepatitis C, which is a serious liver disease. And back then, there were treatments, but they weren't very effective. In August of 92, we were living in Homestead, Florida, and we lost our home to Hurricane Andrew. And we ended up moving back to Pennsylvania, where we were from. So 6 years later, after struggling with hepatitis, my husband died, and my son was 11 at the time. So I became a single parent at 40. And we had sold our business earlier that year because we couldn't keep up with it. My husband had been going to seminary at the time to become an interfaith minister, and I had casually studied along with him. I had read to him because he would fall asleep when he was reading. He had neuropathy in his hands, so I'd type his papers for him. He was a correspondence student, so he didn't go to classes, and that was before the age of Skype or Zoom. So they would send him audio tapes and videotapes, which I would watch with him. I had no clue why I was doing that, except I thought, oh, I'm just helping him out. And eventually he'll get a liver transplant and he'll go on to become a minister. That didn't happen. He ended up in November of 98, he went into the hospital for the last time. He was in a coma, and for 5.5 weeks, he was in the ICU of Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, which is a big hospital in Philly. And I literally lived there. I didn't sleep at home. Somebody else took care of our son. I was at the hospital because I didn't, God forbid he died and I wasn't there. That wouldn't have felt, that would have been horrible. And that if he was called in, if the liver became available and I didn't get to see him beforehand, that would have been horrible. So I did not leave the hospital until he died. When we turned off life support 5.5 weeks into it, because a liver wasn't available in time, I heard the voice. Now, I'm a therapist, so I know the difference between psychotic voices and God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And the voice said, call the seminary and ask to finish what Michael started. So a few days after he died, December 21st, excuse me, of 1998, a few days after his funeral, I did call the seminary, and the dean said, you're welcome to join us and graduate with Michael's class on two conditions. One is that you're doing it for yourself too, and not just for him. And the second is if you want to graduate in June, you have to do both years' work simultaneously or just wait till next year. I said, nope, I'm going to do it all. So I was being prepared. So I still had to take the test. I still had to do the papers and projects, but I knew the subject matter for the first year because I had assisted Michael in it. So in June of that year of 1999, I graduated. I got ordained at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Are you familiar with it? It's in New York City.
No.
It's the largest Gothic cathedral in the Western Hemisphere, I believe. And it's so big that they can't afford to air condition it or heat it. And this
Wow.
was in June of 99, and it was like 90 degrees that day. So we were all dripping. So since then, since becoming ordained, I've married maybe 400 couples, something like that. I don't want a congregation. I don't want to deal with the nonsense of running a congregation. So if not for Michael's illness, if not for him studying to become a minister and not being able to complete the program, I wouldn't have done that if not for becoming an adoptive parent, having a medical condition, the ectopic pregnancy, being a well spouse, caregiving spouse, being widowed. I wouldn't have the knowledge, the firsthand knowledge to be able to help other people. It would all be up here. No.
Yeah, you kind of sometimes you find your life purpose in the darkest of times,
Oh yeah. Yep.
and that that's like your fuel, like you can always
Yep.
call on that. You can always call on
Mhm.
your why to get through whatever it is, no matter how tired you are.
Yep.
If you could just call on that, that will give you, infinite energy and motivation to accomplish whatever is in front of you.
Yeah.
It's I think if people can learn just to tap into that a bit more, instead of just playing the victim, because
Mhm.
it's easy to play the victim, right? It's
Mhm.
easy. I mean, we see it all the time. Certain ethnicities or people in America, right? They feel like they're victims of this or that, and it's easy just to use that and be angry and upset and you know put that energy towards other people instead of just taking a moment and realizing, listen, I'm not a victim. This is just the current circumstances, and we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it together, or I'm gonna get through it by myself. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna get through it. Because this is again, this is our one and only life. So to go through life feeling like everyone's against me, everything's against me, the system's broken, it's against me, but there are flaws in the system. There are certain things that are happening that it seems like it's against you, but it doesn't have to always be, because
Mhm.
everything shall pass.
Right, I'm glad you said that because I was going to say there are inequities. One of my other hats is I'm a journalist who writes about social justice. So there are generational inequities, there are cultural, religious, gender, um, racial inequities. And even in the midst of that, there are people that get through it. So I encourage people to take a look at what's not working and say, what can I do to change it? And if there's some things that you can't do alone, you seek support for it. You find allies, you find people who are there with you. And, it's, you've heard the term toxic positivity,
Hmm.
spiritual bypassing. I don't do that. I acknowledge, yeah, this is horrible. I work with a lot of abuse and trauma survivors. And what I tell them is that what happened to you should never have happened. And if it's okay with you, can I be angry on your behalf and stand with you in your anger about this? And they all say yes. And then I say, all right, what can you do to break the cycle? If you're an abuse survivor, how do you break the cycle and not let what happened to you be a validation of what they did to you? Okay, so I do acknowledge that people have had struggles. That's the victim part, but you don't have to stay a victim.
Hmm.
That's, and again, that's not blaming somebody for being in their position. But if there's something you can do about it, let's figure out what that is and help boost you so that you can continue on. Excuse me. But what that year taught me, and then the 6 years after that, is that I can survive anything. Now, I was blessed with parents who modeled resilience. They have both since passed. My dad died in 2008, my mom in 2010. And one of the things that I appreciate is that they taught me how to live without them. I miss them. I feel them with me all the time. They were my biggest cheerleaders. And they always taught me that anything is possible to be able to overcome. And overcoming is not the same as getting over. So if one of the losses that people have is someone they love, like in your case, you say you've lost a lot, you don't get over it, you get on with your life. You can
Hmm.
still grieve however you do, because there is no statute of limitations on grief. It's whatever you're feeling in the moment, but it doesn't have to shape your next choices.
Right. And what kind of practical strategies do you offer or suggest to people that are trying to, face those challenges and that want to change in their life? What do you say to them?
Right. First thing I do is ask them to take a deep breath. because when we're breathing, our brains are oxygenated. When people are under stress, they're more likely to hold the tension in their bodies or hold their breath. So I say, all right, let's take a deep breath together. And let's take a look at what you still have left. That if you've lost a loved one, if you've ended a marriage or relationship, if your house blew down in a hurricane, if you had a serious medical condition, what has been left from those things that you can use to rebuild your life? That's important too. Look at models, role models. Who in your life is a resilient thriver? Was there a parent, a teacher, a mentor, somebody you admire that bounced back? I have friends whose parents or grandparents are Holocaust survivors. So they would look to them as, okay, if they could get through that, I can get through anything. If my
Right.
family members could not only survive but not become bitter and angry. There's a book that I recommend to people called Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by Dr. Viktor Frankl. He was the only survivor of his family in the Holocaust. He lost his wife, his child, his parents, and he wrote this marvelous book about taking a look at what's really there, but not letting it embitter you, not letting it not devastate, because of course it's devastating, but he talked about the idea that we have a choice of how we deal with whatever life gives us.
Mhm.
So definitely check that book out. um, I had an experience after my parents died, in 2014, on the way home from the gym at the age of 55. I had a heart attack, and that came out of the blue. I didn't expect that. And as a result, what I say is the woman that I was died that day to give birth to the one that's talking to you now, and she had to die because she was killing me. I was a workaholic. I worked 12 to 14-hour days, slept maybe 5 or 6 hours a night for about 2 years. I wasn't dealing well with the grief of my parents, around my parents' deaths. I suppressed it. I was the social worker that dealt with their medical staff, with hospice. I was the minister that officiated at their funerals. And the grieving daughter was back in a room somewhere. And the heart attack, I think, was partly that, was partly my crazy work schedule. My blood pressure was through the roof. My cholesterol was through the roof. I rarely took naps. I would say sleep is highly overrated
Hmm.
until it wasn't. I was swigging 5-hour energy drinks, not every day, but a couple times a month. And I actually did that the day before the heart attack. So it all came to a head. And I had to realize that I couldn't let the heart attack go to waste. I needed to reconfigure my life. And that meant taking naps. That meant cutting myself some slack, changing my work. I didn't change my career, but um, at the time I was working in an outpatient drug and alcohol rehab. And cosmically, coincidentally, universally, whatever you want to call it, I was offered a job around that time to work from home, as a journalist, for a company that owned drug and alcohol rehabs. So I was on the editorial team, and I wrote articles about mental health, addiction, and recovery. So I was able to work my own schedule, work out when needed in cardiac rehab. And I encourage people that if you have a life challenging illness, no matter what it is, use that as a tool as well to change your life. Don't let it go to waste. Learn from it. When I was in the hospital, one of the nurses came in at like 4 o'clock in the morning. You know how they come in and wake you up to make sure you're still breathing.
Right.
And we had a conversation, and she was a cancer survivor. And I told her, what I did professionally. She says, when you recover, but not before, give yourself a chance to recover. You really should go out there and educate women about cardiac disease. So I did that. Um, After my husband died, I became a volunteer for Gift of Life Donor Program, which is a big organ donor education and procurement organization in Philadelphia. and I would do presentations about the importance of organ donation. So everything that I've done or that's happened in my life, I've used it as a stepping stone to the next level of service to the world and of taking care of myself. So I encourage people to be of service too. Okay. If you're struggling, if you're lonely, if you're feeling purposeless, if you're feeling like a victim, help somebody else.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's beautiful. Now, you've also did a TEDx talk not too
Mhm.
long ago.
Yeah.
Can you share with our audience a little bit about that?
Sure. For those that don't know, TedX is not a subsidiary, but TED, TED, capital, all capital letters, stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And TEDx are individually, franchise is the word that comes to mind, individual stages throughout the world. And this one that I did was in Lima, like Lima Bean, Lima, Ohio. And it was called TEDx Faroe Park. And the way that I got there, roll back the clock to like 2008, 2009, and I saw Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, um, do a TED Talk. And hers was, I call it Big TED. So it was the main TED stage. And she talked about her journey in the book and all that. And it was also about creativity and the creative muse. And I said, oh, I want what she's having. I want to do that. So, like anything that I've created in my life, it starts first with an idea. So, if you have something you want to do, let the idea germinate and then say, all right, how do I get from here to here? From the thought to actually seeing it through. So, I continued watching other people's talks. What else? I told myself I'm going to do this. I told other people in my life I'm going to be doing this. And I have wonderful yay sayers in my life, not too many naysayers, people that are your cheerleaders. And I acted as if it was already on its way. Then in, what year was it? Early 2021, a friend of mine did a talk, and I said, "How did you get there?" And she introduced me to her coach. His name is Cesar Cervantes. Caesar is a stage comedian. He's a speaking coach. He's a TEDx coach, and so I made that um, pivotal phone call, and I said, "All right, we need to talk." And by the end of the phone call, I said, all right, I'm investing my time, energy, and money in this because I really want this. So that was in October of 2021. I started working with Caesar, and his role was to help handhold and shepherd me through this. Now, I already had the talk sort of formulated in my head, and it was called Overcoming the Taboo of Touch. When I was in graduate school earning my MSW, I did a paper called Counseling Practitioners' Views on Using Touch as a Therapeutic Modality. Now, therapists are taught, oh, don't touch your clients, especially don't hug your clients. Oh, horrors. So Caesar asked me why that was, and I told him. And he says, what if we turned it on its head and we figured out a way to have it be okay with consent? How, would it be therapeutic with consent to touch your clients? So that was the through line of my talk. When you do a TEDx talk, it's not just storytelling standing on a stage. It's a carefully curated, cultivated, in my case, 17-minute monologue. No notes, no cue cards, no teleprompter. It's got to be in here. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm 64 years old. What if I forget? What if I screw up? Or, all that, the imposter syndrome, monkey mind chatter. So the other part of his job is to offer, ways of connecting with the various stages. Now, my agreement to myself was that I was going to only go apply to stages that were within driving distance because it was during the pandemic. I wasn't ready to fly. So, he had mastermind groups, people that were wanting to do their own talks were part of the group. I would meet with him regularly. And in April of 2022, I got a thumbs up from the stage in Ohio, and that was a 9-hour drive. So when I told my best friend about it, she said, "Oh, I'm coming with you. No, you can't say no. We're going to rent a car. We're going to drive out there." So we went. And then the real work began. And then the panic began. And the imposter syndrome kicked in. Like, uh-oh, this is real now. So I had between April and October of 2022 to be ready for this. So the way that I got ready was, again, visualizing myself on the stage, practicing the talk incessantly in my head, in the car, in the shower, with people that I knew. Um, but the most powerful part of it was in my sleep. I would dream about my talk. I would dream that I was on stage doing it. And I'm a very powerful dreamer. And then I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and when I couldn't go back to sleep, I'd say, okay, let's run it through. So before I was even finished it, I was asleep. Most TED stages have a red circle in the middle, I guess like a red carpet kind of thing. So I bought a red like a bath rug, but it's big, and it's over there in my dining room. And I'd stand on it and I'd practice. Now, by the time I got to the stage in Ohio, there was no red circle on the stage, so I was a little bit bummed, but it was okay. Um, and it was just a remarkable experience. And one of the things that one of the coaches said to me, because we got when you're called on to do this particular stage provided us with three coaches in addition to what I was already doing with Caesar. A writing coach, which I really didn't need a whole lot of guidance on because Caesar and I really polished this. A speaking coach, like a presentation coach, like a stage presentation coach, and a life coach. And the life coach was there because this is really stressful. I describe it as being like an emotional marathon that I had to get through because it had me questioning everything about my life. Like, who are you to do this? What if you mess up? What if you forget? What if you fall on your face? What if you, like, because of the heart attack, and I also have COPD, what if you run out of breath? What if you can't do this? And I said, stop. So I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not religious, but I have what I call God versations. And I said to God, goddess, whoever, whatever, all right, what do I do? I'm afraid that my brain is not going to work. Can I borrow yours? So the message that I got was, I wouldn't have put this in your path if you were not able to do this.
Right.
And you're doing it for, let's say, the glory. It was sort of like the glory of God. And I flinched at the message because it felt very Christian. I was raised Jewish, and I'm an interfaith minister, but it felt very traditionally Christian, for the glory of God. And then I said, no, I can look at it any way I want, for the spirit, for the universe, whatever. So I carried that with me, and that helped. Then when I got to the stage, finally, there was an oops that took place. They had us mic'd up with like lavalier mics, and the cord went down the back of my jacket, and the little box was attached to my waistband. And I was the second one to go on stage. And I was grateful for that I wasn't the first, but that I also could finish my talk and then relax and watch everybody else's. So when I was about to go on stage, I said to Amy, who was the coach, make sure, please, that you flip the switch on the back so I'm not muted, and because I can't reach it. And she said, don't worry, they'll take care of it at the sound booth. 4 minutes into my talk, Amy comes meandering out, takes me by the arm, brings me backstage, and she said, you were right. There's a problem. They didn't unmute you. And she flipped the switch. She says, okay, now go back out there and start again. I went, you know, a brief, and then I did. And that convinced me that I had it committed to memory. And the people that were in the auditorium could hear me, but the live people that were listening and watching on live stream couldn't hear me. And that's how she knew, is that they were sending messages through, we can't hear her, we can't hear her. So afterward, another one of the coaches approached me after everybody was done, and she said, I teach public speaking, college level public speaking. Can I use a clip of what just happened to teach my students how to bounce back in the midst of an oops like that? And sure, so I'm assuming she did. I have no idea. So that was the journey. And then afterwards, it was such a relief. And when I walked off stage, I was crying because it was such an emotional moment. And just, I encourage anybody who wants to do it, get in touch with me. Okay. And, reach out to me and I can lead you through it. But I will always recommend talking to Caesar because he is just a kick ass coach, and he's supportive and he's funny, and he's everybody's cheerleader that works with him.
Now, what is their criteria for allowing a speaker to go on one of their stages? What do you have to accomplish before you can?
Right. Well, there's an application. You don't have to have a degree in anything. You don't even have to teach whatever it is, but it has to have some kind of um, what's the word, scientific or um, some proof, some validation of what you're talking about. You can't just go out and tell a story, and so that's part of it. Each stage has a different kind of application. Some require like a 30-second, 1 minute, or 2 minute pitch of what the talk is about. Some require that you send them a list of all the places you've spoken before, if you have that, and references of like what it is you're talking about. So I had sent them articles about the things that I was talking about in my presentation, and they get hundreds of applications. And in ours, I think they narrowed it down to 10 people.
Well,
So that helps too. And the more places you apply to, the greater likelihood that somebody's going to say yes. Now,
true.
this one, the theme might have had something to do with it too. The theme of ours was humanity. So everybody's talk had something to do with being human. And mine was about, touch by consent. So you can't get much more human than that.
Right, right. Yeah, well, congratulations on getting through that.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
that I could
Mhm.
imagine. I mean, the number one fear for most people is actually speaking in front of a large crowd,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there's that.
Mhm.
Did you feel like that was holding you
Yeah.
back for the most
No,
part,
not at
standing in
all.
front of people, or was it more so
Yeah.
like having the confidence to be able to deliver the message?
No, neither of those. It was remembering it. That was
Remembering it.
I've been a speaker for more than 30 years. I speak for a living, which is why this is a little daunting today. But I'm a therapist. I do presentations. I teach continuing education classes for social workers. I've taught at medical schools and nursing schools, all of that. So it wasn't about public speaking. I love being on stage. And it wasn't about having the confidence to do it. It was about, am I going to be able to memorize and deliver this talk as if it's not being memorized,
Mhm.
as if it's interactive. There is an interactive part of it at the very end. Actually, the beginning and the end. There's an interactive component to it. So yeah, it was more about, am I going to be able to memorize this and then
Mm.
seem casual about it.
Right, right, right. Well, fantastic. That's
Thank you.
wonderful. Kudos to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure if I'll ever get to that point where I apply, but I should write that down as a goal and visualize it in the future,
Yeah. Yep.
whether or not when I feel like I'm ready. But I think everything kind of has its place in everyone's journey,
Mm.
right? Like you
Yeah.
feel like you have to do something first before you can go on to the next step or use
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
particular event in your life
Mhm.
or success or accomplishment as a stepping stone to go further up
Yeah.
that ladder, climbing that ladder, so to speak. You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, congratulations to you on that. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for coming on the
Oh,
podcast,
pleasure.
Edie. Can you tell our guests, I'm sorry, our listeners where they could find you?
Sure. My website is www.opti, OPTI hyphen mystical, mystical.com. Where that came from is somewhere in the last 10 years, I had a dream or a message in a meditation that said, you're not just an optimist, you're an optimistic who
Hmm.
sees the world through the eyes of possibility. So back in, it might have been 2013 or 2014, um, I posted that on my Facebook page, and this person created a meme around it, and it made what I call a worldwide whirlwind tour. On my birthday of that year of 2014, somebody messaged me and said, Julian Lennon just posted your meme on his Facebook page. You know who Julian Lennon is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Julian
yeah, yeah.
Lennon's son. Well, some people aren't sure. So I said, nah. And they said, yeah, go look. It's there. It was there. So look up Julian Lennon, optimistic, and it'll be there. So that's my website. I'm on Facebook as Edie Weinstein. My email address is by divine divine design design at comcast.net. So by divine design at comcast.net. And if you are inclined to do a TEDx talk, I will happily put you in touch with Caesar. He's not, he's just, yeah, just remarkable. And one thing to know about me, and Tom will tell you, that when I believe in somebody, I promote the heck out of them. I let the world know about them.
Wonderful. Well,
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you for coming on the podcast again.
my
I
pleasure.
wish you all the best moving forward. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Edie. Bye bye.
Bye.
And if you would like to support the podcast, please visit Amazon.com and search Conquering Hill 50 writing prompts for a dream chaser. And also visit Etsy.com and search Conquering Hill for all our gear. Thank you.